everyone, and welcome back to Rotten Tomatoes is Wrong. It's your girl, Jacqueline, back yet again with my favorite person around this time of year, Mr. Mark Ellis.
Well, I used to be your favorite person around this time of year. I committed a transgression against Jacqueline that I felt like we should open the show with just to get the air out there. And
I'm very curious. By the way, y'all, he teased me with this, been on pins and needles. So, Mark, tell the tale.
So I was in New York the last 5 days doing a lot of different jobs and shows. Joel Mears, our beloved former editor-in-chief of Rotten Tomatoes. I got to host the final panel that he was on as that title at Rotten Tomatoes, and we had a great time talking about the upcoming book, The Binge Guide, The Ultimate Guide to Television. And Joel came to one of my stand-up shows. We had a great time palling around. And so we're having a great week. And then I decided to go to a bar with a bunch of my friends on Sunday to watch football. It's a Chicago bar, Jacqueline. And this is where I'm going with this, is that Jacqueline's a big Packers fan. I was amongst Chicagoans watching the Bears, and they got a win over the Raiders. And so the way you celebrate a Bears win is there's this awful liquor that is based in Chicago called Malort, and everybody does a free Malort shot. And so I did a Malort shot, and I was a Chicago Bear fan for about 5 minutes towards the end of that game. So I apologize, and I hope this doesn't affect the rest of the show today because we have a great guest and a really fun series of movies to talk about.
I mean, Mark, your Washington football team.
Yes.
And we are aligned for our hatred of the Cowboys. And
yes.
So
we always have that.
It does feel a little bit like you slept with my ex-boyfriend, not with my boyfriend. Like if you were like in front of me cheering for the Bears, there would be a problem.
And I would have never done this. This was done on the sly. It was the cheap hotel room of bars, and we don't ever have to talk about it again. But I just wanted to let you know I still support you and your cheesehead wearing brethren.
Hey, and we had a great game on Sunday. And yes, folks, you just came into Rotten Tomatoes' ESPN, but we're going to switch it up and get into Halloween pretty quickly here because it is Halloween time and Halloween Kills is now in theaters. And our guest this week is here to talk about it along with the Halloween franchise, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to break down all of the films, all the timelines, and the various craziness that sort of got kicked off after John Carpenter's seminal Halloween from 1978. So let's go ahead and get into it. Introduce our guest today. He is a screenwriter, and he wrote a little Halloween film you guys might remember called Freaky, which is out now on HBO Max. And he has another slasher in the works at Ace called Time Cut. He's a massive Halloween and slasher fan. Everyone, please welcome our certified fresh guest, Mr. Michael Kennedy. Hello, sir.
Hey there. Thanks for having me.
So glad to. I appreciate you being here, man. I really do feel we are in good Halloween hands. And
I hope so.
Yeah. So have you had a chance to look at our ranking at Rotten Tomatoes? Because this is another one of our ranking episodes where we take the franchise, let the Tomatometer decide the good, bad, and indifferent. How are you feeling about it? Are we right with this ranking? Are we wrong with this ranking? What are you thinking about it?
Pretty spot on, I would say, in a lot of ways. There's maybe one or two that deserve to be a little bit higher, but they're pretty correct. And they're in pretty good order as far as worst to best.
I mean, Mark is actually going to break down for us the rankings and give us their order and attempt to maybe give us a bit of a synopsis. Yeah, let's go ahead, Mark. If you can please give us the various particulars of this slasher classic and where Rotten Tomatoes ranked the various installments.
Halloween kicked off in 1978, and it's all about Jamie Lee Curtis plays Laurie Strode, a babysitter, and she is being attacked and stalked and all sorts of terror infused from Michael Myers. Little Michael Myers, there's always just been something wrong with this kid ever since he murdered his much older sister. And then we find out in some iterations of Halloween canon that Laurie is actually the sister of Michael Myers. Other iterations have retconned that. But the bottom line is this. If you live in Haddonfield, Illinois, you might want to Airbnb on some tropical destination during Halloween because bad things happen at the hands of Michael Myers, who hails from Haddonfield. And so where we are right now is Halloween Kills is now in theaters, and that's a sequel to the 2018 film Halloween, which acts as a direct sequel to 1978's Halloween. Now, you may be saying, well, Bart, there's The Curse and The Revenge and all these other Halloween movies. All of those have been retconned. And so now we just go from Halloween 1978 to Halloween from 2018. But there are other Halloween movies that you can enjoy out there, such as Halloween 2, which came out in 1981. And then you have Halloween 3, which has nothing to do with any of them. That's Season of the Witch. Halloween 4 was the return of Michael Myers, and so on and so forth. And according to the Tomatometer, it's still the OG that is the highest rated, and boy, is it certified fresh, 96%. That's far and away the lead. There's only one other Halloween movie that is on the fresh side of the Tomatometer, and that would be, you guessed it, 2018's Halloween at 79%. We currently, as of this recording, don't have data on Halloween Kills, but we do know that the next highest rated film is rotten in the series, Halloween H2O, from 1998, which was the return of Jamie Lee Curtis to the character of Laurie Strode, and that acts as a direct sequel to Halloween 2 from 1981. Did I lose anybody yet? Halloween H2O is 52%, and from there we kind of get more and more rotten. Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, is at 41%. Halloween 2 is 32%. Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, is 29%. Halloween, the Rob Zombie reboot from 2007, is at 28%. And then that sequel's at 21%. Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, is 12%. Halloween Resurrection, 12%. And Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, starring Paul Rudd, is at 9%. And so they were getting bad and worse and really bad there for a while. But I do sort of lean towards our beloved guest Michael here, where I think a couple of those movies, Jacqueline, could stand to be a little higher up on the Tomatometer.
Yeah. I don't know how I feel about this. I just need to take a minute to assess the fact that two of my obsessions before the age of 20, Paul Rudd and Josh Hartnett, bookend the bottom three, basically, of Halloween movies. I'm very upset about this. Is that right? No, Halloween H2O is higher. Never mind. Halloween H2O is higher. So
it almost gets to fresh.
Should be higher than it is.
So Josh Hartnett had a good one. It's only Paul Rudd who, any girl that watched Clueless was in love with Paul Rudd and probably still is. Okay. I want to know about you, Michael.
Okay.
Like, I know you told us, so far indifferent, but just real quick, what is the one glaring, jumping out at you that needs to be higher? Besides, I guess, H2O. Is that the one you're saying?
Well, there's, the ones to me that need to be certified fresh, I'll say, are Halloween H2O.
Wow.
I think, did you say how or? Wow?
No, I said, wow. I'm digging this.
I think it deserves, so that movie, I have friends that made 2018. I actually think H2O is the better of those two movies.
Shade. Okay.
And I love 2018 movie, but I think H2O is the better version.
Oh, wow.
I think had H2O come out in this day and age, it would have been received better by critics and fans than it was in 1998. I think she explores a lot of very similar themes in the 1998 movie. And the reason I actually think it's a better movie is they spend the entire movie on Laurie Strode, as opposed to deviating from that character to random characters. That's, I think, the biggest problem with 2018. And I like the 2018 movie, and I love Jamie Lee Curtis in it, and I love Judy Greer in it, especially. But there's too much time away from the Strode girls.
Okay.
In the film, and I love that in 1990, the 1998 H2O, it's all about Jamie Lee.
Okay.
And I think that's why that movie stands out for me comparatively and deserves a higher rating.
Guys, I feel like I'm going to get a lot of Halloween education because little secret, I didn't watch any scary movies before I started being sort of a professional critic. And we'll get into that later. But first, Producy Lucy, how you doing, ma'am? Where do you fall on Halloween? Where do you fall on scary movies?
I did not, have not, will not see any of these films because I'm too scared. I was talking to Michael yesterday and I was like, no, I'm fascinated with like that kind of, dark stuff and spooky stuff, especially during Halloween. But these movies really, and especially scary movies that have a root in the 70s, there's something creepier about that kind of like 70s look and feel. So I remember seeing footage of Halloween in the 1978 version and being like, hell to the no, this is not happening. Because that kind of like the film look and the like bad hair and bad outfits to me actually makes it scarier. But really quick, I just realized, because I know, Michael, you love the new film.
I do.
It's tracking at 56% rotten. It's not official yet, but that to me, based off kind of the chatter I've seen online, that seems really low.
Breaking news.
Michael, how do you feel?
I think it'll get a little bit higher too. I think it'll end up in the 60% range somewhere. I think it'll be below the last one, but I think it'll end up not certified fresh, but it'll end up fresh, right? There's a difference.
Yes. And I appreciate you for making that distinction. Mark, have you seen the new one yet?
I have not had a chance to see the new one yet. I've been very busy cheering for my new favorite team, the Chicago Bears. And so
my God.
Have not been able to do Halloween Kills just yet, but I am very excited about seeing it because we basically got left off of that trailer before the pandemic hit. Like right when the pandemic hit, we saw that just like 15-second clip of Laurie Strode yelling at the firefighter, like, don't go to that, let him burn. And then it's like, oh, we got to wait so much longer to see this movie now. So I'm just so excited to finally get it out there. But I have good news for Lucy because the movie, I agree with Michael, first of all, that H2O should be much, much higher. I think that is a fresh film, bar none. But I'm also going to support and say that Lucy's, maybe her introduction, not into Michael Myers, but into the Halloween franchise, not current Halloween canon, is Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, because it does play upon a lot more religious themes. There's a lot more, obviously, witch going on. There's a lot of things that are going on in that it's a fun horror movie as long as you don't walk in with the expectations that Michael Myers is going to show up eventually. And so I think there is a lot of redeeming value to Halloween 3 Season of the Witch around this holiday that we all celebrate by watching our favorite spooky films. So like I said, it's currently rotten. It's 41%. And I think it can get higher. I think that movie deserves to be fresh. I just said it here.
I agree.
Wow. Okay.
100% agree. That was the other movie I was going to mention that should be certified.
Certified Fresh is Season of the Witch. Okay, Season of the Witch is not one for me. I'm with you guys on H2O, and I think I've seen 2 of the other installments. 2 or 3. I think I've seen 2 or 3 of the other installments, but man, I'm ready to get into this. So let's go ahead before we do that. So Mark, right-ish. Michael, right-ish. Is that correct on Rotten Tomatoes on this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm saying no. I'm saying that there's too many Halloween movies that are way too low on the tomato.
I guess I could agree with that too. There's some that deserve to be higher, but not fresh.
Yeah. Basically, the question is Michael and Mark. We have the same feeling about it. Michael's just a much nicer human being than I am, so he's going to lean towards it's fine, and I'm going to be like no. Y'all got to get the score up to fresh.
Okay, I will say for the films that I have seen, I am like okay-ish. But I know that I need to see more of these. But honestly, there's too many hours in the day. And that's why we have this next person, our review curation manager, Tim Ryan. He's going to help fill in the gaps that I have forgotten with our favorite segment, 2 Minutes with Tim. So Brian, please cue the music.
2 Minutes with Tim. When it comes to the Halloween franchise, there's a lot to cover. So we're going to focus on the peaks and valleys. For now, let's set aside Halloween Kills, the newest entry in the franchise. There have been 11 films leading up to it. Of those, only 2 are fresh. The original Halloween from 1978 is certified fresh at 96%. And Halloween from 2018 is certified fresh at 79%. The lowest reviewed films in the series are Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers from 1995, which is rotten at 9%. And tied at rotten at 12% are Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers from 1989, and Halloween Resurrection from 2002. And just as an aside, Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, the only film in the franchise not to feature Michael Myers, is rotten at 41%, although it does have something of a cult following. So it's safe to say that, by and large, the Halloween series has been more of a popular success than a critical one. But what did some of the critics have to say? In a fresh review for the original Halloween, Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times wrote, "Halloween is an absolutely merciless thriller, a movie so violent and scary that, yes, I would compare it to Psycho." On the other hand, in a rotten review for Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, James Berardinelli of Real Views wrote, "Needless to say, the gore level is high and the scare level low, although not as low as the intelligence level." So anyway, Jacqueline, Mark, it's Halloween. I guess everyone's entitled to one good podcast. Back to you, folks.
Hey, you know what? No matter what time of year it is, 2 Minutes with Tim gets me in the spirit. Can we just go ahead and say that? Whatever that spirit has to be, he gets us there. Man, it's just crazy to think of how many of these they've made. Let's go ahead and get into sort of talking about the various films, favorite moments, favorite characters. All right, Brian, let's go ahead and transition over to our movie talk section. So like if you're making the recipe of a Halloween movie, and you've made the recipe of a couple of horror movies now, what do you think are the ingredients that go in there?
Okay, so the biggest 2 or 3 are simplicity. The Halloween movies that are the most effective are the ones with the simplest premise and setup. Halloween, Halloween H2O, Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills even. And I would even go as far as say Halloween 2 are all pretty straightforward movies that focus on character. Which is why we love them and why they're effective. And the simplicity goes the same way with Michael. He's simple in these movies. He's, these are the movies where he's essentially still pure evil. Even though Halloween 2 introduces a sibling angle, it's not till the very end. So it's essentially just some guy in a mask walking around terrorizing people in a town, and it's effective because you don't know anything about him. And I think those are the scariest villains a lot of the time. So simplicity, a strong adversary for the killer. Again, all those movies star Jamie Lee Curtis. So Laurie Strode, obviously icon. She's an icon. A character who is tough like she is, always works. In fact, Halloween 4 is effective because even though it's a little girl, it's a tough adversary, which is why that movie for me works and should be a little higher on the Tomatometer. And I mean, those are really the 2 main ingredients you need for a really good Halloween movie. I mean, obviously John Carpenter's score elevates it above most slasher movies just by existing. And yeah, those are really all you need to make a really good Halloween movie.
Hey,
I like
dig
the setting
simplicity
too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the real estate. It's location, and these movies continue to get inside of our pathology because we all think we're secure. We want to feel like we're secure in our own homes. And when Laurie looks out the window in that first Halloween movie and just sees this creep standing there by the laundry, it's like, I don't feel safe anymore. And that just, that acts as a prelude from everything from Scream to where we get a phone call and the calls are coming from inside the house sort of thing, up to The Strangers, where again, we know nothing about the strangers. We just see their head pop in and we're like, oh my God, what the hell is that? So you can make it dead serious like that. You can have a wink and a nod with it with something like You're Next. But that is the most chilling aspect of this to me, is that this guy really wants to get in our house and we can't stop him.
I'll also add in too that you have to have a certain level of sin. And maybe this is the Southern grew up in a very domineering Christian household, but a certain level of people doing bad things. Like it's the thing that Randy talks about in Scream, which is literally absolutely true. If you grew up in those type of households, you definitely understand kids drinking, kids having sex out late when they're not supposed to be. That sort of danger that's already dangerous when you're of a certain age. And so when you add in the aspect of like, oh, making these dangerous decisions can get you killed. I mean, those were remember the prom night videos from like Driver's Ed? Like that's like literally like that's a huge part of that. And the Halloween translates into that.
Well, as Carpenter put it, because he got accused in the early 80s of being like the morality police, which is funny because like if you know anything about John Carpenter, that's just not who he is. Dude loves nothing than a good beer, a good joint, and like making music.
That's fun. And
he got accused of being the morality police because a lot of his characters, and a lot of characters at the time, you know, in Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street and all the big classics, he was accused of that because, you know, it is characters having sex and drinking and doing drugs that are dying. But as he put it, it's not the sin that's killing them, it's the distraction. So they're not mentally prepared or focused on anything else outside of their being because they're distracted by the revelry. Whereas Lori is in tune with everything going around her because she has nothing to distract her. So I always thought that was really interesting because the genre, Randy even says it in Scream, it's the sin factor, kind of ran with the idea of it being a sin. And John Carpenter's like, dude, they were teenagers. They were just Can I say that? Like,
I think Lucy's giving me the thumbs up on this one because I think Lucy grew up also with similar things. But like, if you grew up in uber religious things, they made you think that. They're like, you're going to end up murdered and stabbed the minute you let a guy go to third base. Let's go back to the OG because there's a lot to sort of dissect with that. It was so seminal. It was such like this watershed moment with horror that like it's been imitated now to nauseum. And the only horror movies I think that are successful are ones that sort of subvert that. But it's got so many great moments. Michael, I'll start with you. What is your favorite moment from the OG Halloween films?
A really good question. I mean, the whole movie is just so perfect. But I think for me, it's that just the original really set the standard for like a good chase scene. And the whole climax is literally just like a 20-minute long chase scene. And it's so thrilling and scary. And I think it was Lucy who brought up something about like 70s movies just have a different feel. And there's something about the movie, I think it was maybe because it was low budget or because the characters and the actors were so new and fresh that really feels like you're immersed in the experience. And the way Jamie Lee Curtis screams, "Help me," after knocking on the next door neighbor's door and they like open their blinds and then take a look at her and are like, nope, and like just shut the blinds on her. The way she just like terrifyingly screams, "Help me," as she's hopping off that porch and started to run back across the street is just like, it's scarier than anything else in the movie. And he's not even in the shot.
Oh God, help me, please! Hello? Hello? Oh? Hello, help me! Man, please help me! Please! Can't you hear me? Oh God! Oh, help me, please!
And I think for me, it's like you really feel her fear in that moment.
Yeah, and I love that creepy opening of the movie where it's the pioneering work with the Panavision camera where you get that first person sense and you feel like as an audience we're unwillingly being thrust into, wait, are we the villain now in the movie we're watching?
So cool.
Because it's got that it's not shaky cam, it's not a Bourne Identity movie, but it's not that set shot either. It's just a hybrid of where we feel movement and we feel a sense of kinetic energy creeping up towards the house, and just the way the camera is moving ever so slightly. It feels unnatural and it feels like something bad is on the other side of this camera, and it turns out to be a young Michael Myers, and it's such a great tone setter for the movie we have. And the best part about it is that movie was made for what I think at the time maybe $300,000. That might be generous with the budget, and so you had to be very resourceful, and that's a great indication that we can be resourceful with shots like this and still be effective.
Yeah, the camera work in the first movie is what brings the audience in so much. And it's so funny. I look at a movie like It Follows, uses so much of the camera work from Halloween, that stalking element. That's almost the entire premise of the film, using that. It's hard to pick a favorite moment in this one because they all kind of string together. But all I can picture is Jamie Lee Curtis's nonverbal acting in that movie is kind of just jaw-dropping when you think about it, because so much of it plays on her face. And the shot I'm thinking of is the one I think it even plays in Scream. It's the one of her like walking in the door and she just pushes it open with this like, what's going on type wonderment. And I think that's where she sees one of the first bodies. I want to say, I picture her walking in and it's the moment when she realizes, oh, this is the I'm in a horror movie moment.
Yeah, when Annie's on the bed.
Yes, that's exactly right. Thank you very much. that moment is incredible because the audience knows she's in a horror movie, but that is the first time she realizes it. And then everything just goes down from there. It's sort of like the last calm before the storm. I love those parts of horror movies. It really, it's really interesting to see what she does in that because it's literally just the score, the camera, and her face. That makes that whole scene.
And that score does the opening credits such a great service because there's a few types of different opening credits you get in a movie where you can have. I love the movies that don't even have opening credits. They just like the ultimate example, Star Wars, where it's like we're not going to waste time and let the audience get distracted. Here's the giantest letters you've ever seen with the most soaring, bombastic score in outer space. You're locked into the movie. But then you have other movies where they literally treat the opening credits, which is fine. Where it's like, okay, the audience is still coming into the theater. We're going to let everybody just kind of relax and get adjusted to their seats, make sure there's nothing sticky on the floor. But Halloween, it's just a pumpkin. But the score is just so unnerving that you're kind of just waiting to see what the next thing on screen is. And I love when the score of a movie or the opening credits can just completely shut us up and get us locked into the tone of the movie. What a great way to set the pace for things to come.
Well, the original does that without showing a single frame of the movie.
Yeah, this is very true.
Literally, it sets a tone and you haven't seen anybody. You just see a glowing, smiling pumpkin. And somehow they managed to make that smiling pumpkin seem creepy with just a simple score.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. And it's like now it's what you expect from every Halloween movie.
And it showed the beauty of scoring in horror movies, which is something that was always there, especially in the old monster movie series, like going back to Dracula. And, even the very first jump scare came from a musical cue, because I think it's in The Phantom of the Opera. He's playing the piano, she removes the mask, and then that's like literally the first jump scare ever recorded in cinema. And it's from scoring because he's playing and it's like stop, and then it just adds it to it. And I think one of the things that Halloween really understood is how music couldn't just heighten, but how music could be part and integral to the scares itself, which, again, now it's
the music in that movie tells its own story as well. Yeah. Like people underestimate sometimes how good a good score really makes a good movie great.
Let's move on to the better, like looking at the franchise as a whole. We kind of touched on a lot of the big ones. We touched on H2O, Season of the Witch. Haven't necessarily talked a lot about The Curse of Mike Myers, but even it had its moments. What are your favorite moments, kills overall from the franchise? Michael, go ahead.
God, there's so many. Okay, I will talk about Halloween 6 in the sense that it's got a really good atmosphere. I think it's got one of the better Halloween atmospheres in the entire franchise. So I think that deserves to give it a few points higher. In fact, it's not the worst movie in the franchise per Rotten Tomatoes. That's actually the way Rotten Tomatoes rates it. It's Halloween Resurrection's terrible. But best kills, there's some really great kills in Halloween Kills that are some of the top for me. I think one of my favorite suspense sequences that leads to a kill is the hand in the garbage disposal in Halloween H2O. I think that's a really cool moment. I think the hot tub death in Halloween 2 is pretty rad. Cops do it by the book, getting it with the gun. Kelly Meeker stuck into a wall is a pretty gruesome kill. The thing about the Halloween franchise, though, is Michael isn't Jason. He doesn't do a lot of different type of stuff. The thing I love about Michael is, especially in the original, and I feel like Halloween Kills is the first movie since the original that kind of does this, is he's almost like a little kid playing with a toy. And I love that he's a jokester in Halloween. And then they kind of bring that back in Halloween Kills. And those are my favorite sequences of the movie, not so much any of the kills, but like the Bob kill. That's a terrifying kill. And it's so simple. And for me, that's where the movies excel, is like the suspense is more integral to me than any of the deaths. But Halloween Resurrection has a really funny death where the girl gets decapitated with a kitchen knife. Because that would never happen. You know what I mean? So like, that's pretty memorable because it's so stupid.
Halloween Resurrection that's the movie that immediately followed Halloween H2O, which was the Glorious return of Jamie Lee Curtis. And then Jamie Lee Curtis is like, hey, I just did this movie. I'm not going to do this next, but you got to kill me off in the opening scene. So kind of lets us know the rest of that movie. We kind of figure out why Jamie Lee Curtis was like, I don't feel like being involved in this. But another movie that is maligned that I feel like has its merits, especially for the time that it came out, is Rob Zombie's Halloween, just because when that movie came out in 2007, I don't know that there was somewhere else that you could have gone, because we weren't in this nostalgic phase just yet. Or nostalgia, as our friend Coy Jandra calls it. We weren't there yet where you start to want to have a retread of what we've seen 15 or 20 years ago. And so Rob Zombie tried to make a different type of film where it got really deep into Michael Myers' background and sorts of, it's not an apology for the way he is, but it is an explanation for why he became who he became. But there's just a heartbreaking kill in there, because we all love everyone's favorite badass, Danny Trejo, and he just he eats it at the hands of Michael Myers. And if you wanted to know, look, is Michael Myers ever going to be confused with a world-class sprinter? No. Is he going to be the best athlete? No. He's not that quick, but he got Danny Trejo, so he could get any one of us.
Yeah. Also, the one thing I will say Halloween has done, mostly because of the first one and how seminal it is and how many people love it, is it was able to give us a lot of interesting debuts, but even more so just weird. Busta Rhymes and Halloween Resurrection. Like, real talk. We got Busta Bus just like doing his thing and literally doing the most cliche brother in a horror movie. I'm going to give you the quote for the trailer stuff, but it's fun. And honestly, as someone who had his photo on my refrigerator all the way through probably my second to last apartment, we have Josh Hartnett because of Halloween H2O. That was his debut film. And I feel like I'm a happier person because that is where he came to us. And I think
you can go back to the world of hip hop with Halloween H2O, because LL Cool J just breaking every trope about minorities in horror movies up to that point, where I thought LL Cool J ate it twice in that movie, and he ends up pulling through, and he's such a fun character. He's trying to write a series of novels that Jacqueline Coley would love. The Jacqueline, his trashy romance pulp stuff that Jacqueline I know reads. I know in between her true crime podcast, that's what she's doing to get her mind off of work.
He knows me so well. Look, if I ever leave this, I'm gonna be Stacey Abrams. I'm gonna come up with a really funny pseudonym to write under, like Penelope Cumswell, and it's going to be awesome.
The thing I love about H2O with LL Cool J is his sparring partner is a person off screen the whole movie, and she's memorable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
His wife is really solid in voice work, and I think their relationship is really cute and funny. Yeah, I really like H2O. I think people unfairly at the time I think if that came out today, it would be assessed differently. People at that time were saying it was a Scream clone. And of course, it was the 90s. Everyone was cloning Scream. Of course, Halloween H2O cloned Scream. And also Kevin Williamson was involved. He is Scream.
Yeah.
Let's talk honestly about the movie. The characters, that's one of the few Halloween movies. And let's be real. When you watch all the 12 Halloween movies in a row, you realize there's a lot more misses than hits in this series. Whereas like Friday the 13th, I think, even though it's the best Friday the 13th movie is nowhere near the best Halloween movie. Friday the 13th movies have a nice consistency, at least through like the first 7 or 8, where you know what you're going to get and you have a good time.
That's fair.
The thing that stands out for Halloween H2O is every character is good. You care about the characters and you care about them. And that was something that was happening in the 90s that the 90s didn't get enough credit for at the time with the slasher movie, is that they were really trying to bring you an era of slasher movies where, okay, we're in an era where we're going to not watch these for the killer. We want to watch these for the people. And I thought Halloween H2O did a really good job of that.
And Laurie Strode as Jamie Lee Curtis in that movie, coming back to the franchise, has more on her plate, because now we see what 20 years of this fear of living with this, of trying to relocate and facing alcoholism now, just trying to get through your day and more importantly, your night, living with this thing that is, you always feel like is in the backseat of your car. But she also takes on the role somewhat of a Loomis, played by Donald Pleasance in the original, because now it's her sort of job to have to download this information onto other people's more impressionable minds. Like, hey, this is not just some weirdo that you have to be worried about. This is the ultimate evil in the universe. But I will give a shout out to Donald Pleasance too, from the original Halloween and from Halloween, and pops up again sporadically throughout the canon. He is so good as that character that we always need in a horror movie, where it's sometimes the priest in a possession movie, or or a nun that shows up and just gives us a rational explanation for why things are going on. And we feel like as long as that character is with us, we can get through this, because they're going to use sound logic and reasoning in order to trap this menace. So Donald Pleasance just knocking that role out of the park as well.
100.
Yeah, I was also going to say, too, with what's interesting is we've talked about when Halloween went CW through the Kevin Williamson and H2O, when Halloween goes, basically trying to rip off Friday the 13th and gets very gory and gets very, very sort of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Friday the 13th with it. Rob Zombie, his run is just so singular. It has its fans. I feel like it's weird almost when I look back on it, what that section was. Michael, I'm curious your thoughts on the Rob Zombie era of the Halloween films.
It's interesting because, Mark made a really good point earlier about how like we were pre-nostalgia. Like you think back, like you go Halloween 2018, when that trailer came out and they announced the movie, and Jamie Lee Curtis come back, you're like, duh, why? This is such a simple concept. Of course they're doing this. This makes so much sense. And it's, you realize too, like, weirdly enough, my fiance Brian and I have been watching all the Universal monster movies this month. We started at the beginning and we're watching all the way through to the end. People are like, Hollywood's running out of ideas and they're retconning and all this. They were doing that in 1940. They were doing it with all these movies, and it's just a way to freshen up franchises and stuff. But it's weird because until Halloween did it and Star Wars did it, it was like, and Jurassic Park did it and all that stuff. It was like, why wasn't anyone doing this in the 2000s? You know what I mean? Like, granted, they did it in Halloween H2O, but Rob Zombie's movies come out in a really weird era of horror where it's like post 9/11, casual homophobia, casual bigotry just running rampant in film and in the country. And so it like kind of came in a weird, dirty era of horror. So like they make sense for the time. Like even, I love the Texas Chainsaw remake, but I think that set a standard for the horror movie of the time, especially the slasher, which was grimy and yellow and dirty and grungy and characters that were foul. And who better to do that than Rob Zombie, honestly.
Real talk. Yeah. He's living in his wheelhouse.
Really drawn out violence and gore too. I think that this is the era where we might have put the term torture porn into the lexicon permanently and sealed it, just because some of those kills just go on and on.
I mean, you're okay, I get it. Octavia Spencer's dead. Can you leave the woman alone? Come on.
Poor Octavia. And I will admit, Jacqueline, I am somewhat of an apologist for not necessarily for Rob Zombie's sequel, but for the original, simply because I am such a Rob Zombie fan from his musical abilities that I love, especially his solo stuff, but the stuff with White Zombie back in the 90s too. I just think it's such great metal that I wanted it to be good. And the fact that he went somewhere else with it, I think, again, was sort of necessary at the time, because when we have these reboots, we either had them because we let a number of years go by, or it's because we had so many misfires in a row that we had no choice but to blow it up. And even if it's not ever meaning to be consistent, look at where we were with Batman in 1997 versus where we were with Batman once Batman Begins came out in 2005.
And then look at where we are now.
Where do you go from Halloween Resurrection? Like, the whole bloodline thing that they established in Halloween 2 is out the window. He's just killing a bunch of random people. So it's like, well, now it's just a Jason movie, So it's like, where do you go from that? And I think had the reboot craze not started, they might have gone down that road. I don't know if you've read this book called Taking Shape, which actually talks about all the, there's two books. There's a original book and then there's a sequel book, and they essentially talk about all the different incarnations of Halloween that could have happened. Post-resurrection, they were back to what Halloween H2O helped avoid. They were post-resurrection, they were starting to think about a direct-to-video sequel. until the remake craze happened. So now they, of course, were able to remake the movie. But there was going to be a remake at some time, whether people liked it or not. And Rob Zombie, at least the thing that he did, and I'm not a huge fan of either movie, but I appreciate, especially with his Halloween 2, is that he really did make his own movie.
True that.
He was doing something that all the other remakes weren't doing, is he was following no blueprint.
He's following his own, beating to his own twisted little drum. And I actually respect him for it.
Curious. I've always been curious to see Halloween 2, especially what would have happened had that didn't have the name Halloween in it, and it didn't have a character named Laurie and her name was like Jane and some like how that would have been embraced by fans of horror had it not been called Halloween. Because he has an interesting POV, that's for freaking sure. And the dude can shoot a movie. His movies look good.
Yeah.
I think they get unfairly treated because they have the name Halloween in front of them. But also, if you're going to make a movie called Halloween, don't you have to stick to the ingredients in a way? So it's like...
Or subvert them in a way that's smart. It depends. It depends. Yeah. Before we get out of here, Michael, what is the scariest moment, or what about the franchises scare you the most? Like, what element of it really terrifies you? Is it the chase? Is it...
The most effective, Michael in the Shadows, the Shape. You know, when John Carpenter refers to him as the Shape, and when he's the Shape, that's when he's the scariest. Like, there's the best sequences in the entire series, and David Gordon Green does this a few times too, in 2018 and in the newest one, Kills, is using shadow and light to their advantage. There's that sequence, you talked about it already, where she finds her friends, and that's terrifying, right? There's no dialogue, it's just her reacting, and that's scary. But then the very next thing that happens is she puts herself in a corner where she thinks she's safe, but that open door is next to her and it's complete pitch black, and then his mask just slowly moves into frame. That's terrifying, because that is literally just saying you're not safe anywhere. Like, you think you're alone, but you're not alone. Someone's watching you. Someone's always on your ass. And there's some moments in Halloween Kills where he does that. And I'm just like, those always get me. Always. Get me. So, and Halloween Kills is the first Halloween movie I've been scared in since the original.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's saying something. We're going to get into Halloween Kills, but before I do that, Mark, real quick, what about you? What element of the franchise, what element of the films really scares you the most?
The fact that someone had to teach Michael Myers how to drive an automobile scares the crap out of me. The fact that he somehow managed to take a driver's ed course, because as scary as Michael is in Haddonfield, Illinois, Haddonfield, if you don't want to deal with Michael Myers, maybe just move away from Haddonfield. Of course, that didn't work if your name's Laurie Strode, because she moved all the way to California. And Michael, again, somehow road tripped and stopped at a bunch of gas stations and was just high on Mountain Dew by the time he got to California. So the fact that Michael Myers can get behind the wheel of a car, that is what is terrifying to me. And then also that whole we can lock him up, but is he ever really locked up thing? Like, if somebody gets accused of a crime, they're stalking me, but I find out that they get locked up, I'm like, okay, good. I trust the prison system, not necessarily to rehabilitate this person, but at least I know that I'm good for the next 15 to 20 years. You never feel that way with Mike. He can get out of jail anytime he wakes up and just has a bad morning. He can get out of prison. That is horrifying.
Yeah, I think the fact that, well, based on the fact of how much people love the franchise, he's always coming back. And he's coming back yet again. So let's go ahead in our next section, which is normally behind the scenes. Let's go ahead and talk about the latest installment, which is in theaters now. Brian, cue the music. So, Michael, you've seen it, but we're going to, assume that most of our audience hasn't seen it yet. What were your expectations going into Halloween Kills? Because people, I guess, involved in the making of it. Like, how did they set you up to see it? When did you see it?
I went to the Beyond Fest screening of it.
Okay.
So it had its U.S. premiere at Beyond Fest, and they didn't prep me a lot. One of my friends, Ryan Turk, he's like oversees these movies.
Oh yeah.
He keeps close, man. He doesn't feel anything. And I kind of appreciate him. I mean, I do appreciate him for that because I still get to go in completely clean.
And
honestly,
you talk about a guy who loves horror movies inside and out. That is Ryan Turek to a T. He loves this stuff.
And yes, and Ryan, I know I said Halloween H2O is better, but I still love both movies, so don't get mad at me. And it's not better. I think it just explores different things in a way that I appreciate. So that's a good way to put it.
Okay.
But Halloween Kills, my expectations were low, to be quite honest with you, because I thought, how do you follow up the last movie, which I thought was such a solid, especially that third act. That third act is probably my favorite act in the entire series. Right up there. That whole sequence with Laurie, her daughter, and her granddaughter just trapping Michael is epic. It's so good. And it ends on such a high note. It ends an emotional note for me. I'm a huge fan of these movies, and I feel really a good connection with Laurie Strode. So I actually teared up knowing her trauma was over after 40 years. And then of course they announced a sequel, and I'm like, of course I want a sequel. I don't want these movies to ever end. I want to be 90 years old and going to the theater to see, 120-year-old Michael killing people. But part of me was like, not upset, but I was like, I don't want her to die. So I don't want more movies to be made because someone's eventually going to come along and think they need to kill her in order to close the chapter on her like they did in Halloween Resurrection. So that's, my expectations were low because I'm like, how do you follow up this movie? Like, how do you follow up this movie that feels relevant and necessary? So my expectations were kind of like, oh, it's Michael killing people. I'm going to have fun. And not to give anything away, but that's essentially the movie. But for some reason, I don't know if it was Beyond Fest. I don't know if it was the fact that it was 500 people for the first time in a theater since the beginning of the pandemic for me. I don't know if it's the fact that Jamie Lee Curtis introduced the movie. Surprisingly, no one knew she was showing up. Or that I was literally sitting right next to Ryan Turek during the movie. I don't know what it was, but I loved every second of the movie. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. I had an emotional reaction to being in a theater for the first time in 2 years, to be quite frank. People might make fun of me for that, but I teared up when the movie started because I was so happy to be back in church. So I was all in. I was all in from the beginning. The theme kicked in, the story kicked in, and I was in. I loved every second of it. I don't know.
And the other person that's really feeling that same way about the pandemic and things starting to open back up again is Michael Myers, because he's obeyed the mandates. He's worn a mask the entire pandemic.
Still wearing a mask.
Yep.
Yeah.
See, and he is so thrilled that everybody's back out there doing their things, living their lives so he can murder them joyously. I want to walk out of this theater and say, I want to get right back in there and just run Halloween Ends right now.
Exactly how I felt leaving the theater. My biggest fear for it was like, well, I know there's a third movie, so like this is just going to be filler, and it didn't feel like filler.
Good.
That's how it felt for me. And I guess I'm like the problem with IP today, because I say I'm like, enough with the IP, but then I'm like, oh, you're bringing back characters from 40 years ago? I'm in, and I'm like, just watching those characters roam around was really exciting for me. But this is another reason I liked it better than 2018. So we do have those moments. This is not a spoiler, but we do have the moments in 2018 again where we're away from the Strode women. But this time you're not with two cops sitting in a car talking about sandwiches.
Okay.
This time you're with Tommy Doyle, or you're with Lindsay Wallace, or you're with Marion Chambers. So you're with people you're comfortable with already that are adding to the nostalgia while also going, oh, what's Tommy doing 40 years later? So you're with characters you want to spend time with, as opposed to some high school kid that's like essentially throwing himself on the main female character.
Dude, honestly, that was the one part about it. I was like, who are these people? They're such red shirts. I don't need you. But you need them so that way, the main people you care about can live and we can continue with the franchise and so on and so forth. Before you get out of here, let folks know what you're working on, what they can be on the lookout for next. And because you are an aficionado of film and television, mostly on the scary side, please give us a movie recommendation.
Okay, so my movie Time Cut is in post right now, and it should come out next year. It'll come out next year. We don't know where yet. We don't know where it's going to land, whether it's a studio or a theatrical release or with a streamer. The producer shot it himself, essentially.
Oh, wow.
So he gets to shop that puppy around and give it to the highest bidder, essentially. So, but that should be out sometime next year. And then I am in pre-production. All I can say is on a Christmas slasher that I wrote and I'm executive producing with one of the producers of Freaky.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it's another high concept slasher. People, when Time Cut got announced, people are like, is this all this guy can do? Wait till they hear about this next one.
Yeah.
Really going to say that's all I can do. And then, because it's another mashup.
Love that.
Yeah. And then, so that is honestly hoping to be out next year as well. So my recommendation is for this time of year is watch the original House on Haunted Hill.
Oh, yeah. Great one.
Think people get into the Halloween movies or the slasher movies, but I'm going to recommend the original House on Haunted Hill because Vincent Price is just so gay in the movie and delicious and so sexy and just so vicious and weird. The movie's so bizarre. It really is such a weird movie and it's so fun. So that's going to be my rec.
Thank you again, Michael. It was
It was a lot of fun.
It was a huge pleasure. For folks, wherever you're watching, listening to us, please, please, please rate, subscribe, tell your friends. That way you can become a member of our Catch-Up crew. We literally do this for you. It is my favorite part of the week because we get to come and sort of have a fun time talking about what movies my job got wrong. A big thanks to Producer Lucy, Tim Ryan, Brian Paris, and of course, our guest this week, Mr. Michael Kennedy, and my partner in crime, although apparently not during Sunday football, Mr. Mark Ellis.
We never text anyway. That's our rule. We don't curse each other's teams.
We don't text. We don't text on Sunday. Anyway, thank you all for listening, and we'll see y'all next time. Bye.